Hello and welcome. Any which way you look at it, the opportunity for Indian pharma is huge. However, that's not quite happening. The industry is slowing down. There are lots of problems on regulation, on bringing in capital, and right down to even something like clinical trials. Let's understand what the key issues are when it comes to what's preventing growth in this industry and what needs to be done somewhat on an urgent basis. I'm joined by Sujay Shetty, partner India Pharma and life sciences leader at PWC India, the consulting firm, and they've just released a report on the subject. Sujay, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
So there's a litany of problems, but the interesting thing, perhaps, like unlike other industries, is this is against a sector or which should see growth because there are people who need medicine, hospitalization, healthcare, the works, right? And things are still not moving.
Things are still not moving, and as you rightly pointed out, it's still one of the bright sectors of the Indian economy. You know, if you look at the stock market performance, the results released by companies in recent days, they've all been very, very good. Employees, it's one of the highest pay hikes going. So all in all, everybody, investors are happy, the employees are happy,
so
results are good. So what is the problem? The problem has come predominantly from Delhi in terms of self-inflicted wounds, some which are good, some which are not so good, and these are in the regulatory sphere. Some could be NLEM, the pricing policy, which has a short-term impact. It has one.
Right, and we saw it going from 74 to 348 drugs.
It's gone 74, 340, and companies in the short term will feel the pinch and the pain. Some are gainers, some are losers. But on the whole, they'll work their way through their portfolios. And over a 12 to 18 month period, you have to see that being negated.
Got it.
So they'll definitely have an impact at the volume end. Not on the volume end, sorry, it'll have an impact on the value end in the short term.
Volume might benefit,
Yeah, and over a course of time, 12 to 18 months, companies will work their portfolio strategies and get past that.
Right, so price control is something that can be managed. Okay, so what's the real
then there's a confusion about the uniform code. That's got a linkage to the direct tax code because there are tax penalties coming out of what's allowable by way of sales promotion, what is not. You've seen the issues in corruption in China. So the uniform code seeks to address many of those methods of selling. So this year, the so what of that is that the tax office is going to be particularly curious about Indian pharma companies' P&L to try and see what are those expenses that can be disallowed. This has a very significant impact on the P&L. In some cases, it needs to be studied very carefully. In the two sort of very bad categories lies the clinical trial approval, and this is very important because product launches have stopped, new products are not going through. The delays have been horrendous, and beyond
so currently
the long term,
the whole thing is suspended, right? All the 160 plus trials
basically
have
about
been
5 odd trials with the Supreme Court has said can go on, but something like 140 or 50 have been completely suspended. This is extremely bad for an industry that was supposed to be a billion-dollar industry by now, generating jobs and more importantly for patients, giving them a standard of care. All that has disappeared. Now, if this impasse is not resolved, you don't see new cures coming, new products coming to the market. You see India's ambitions to innovate take a very significant hit. All the ambitions we have about being R&D hub is killed at the source. So it's at a critical juncture. The Supreme Court is due to weigh in. It's invited stakeholders to weigh in on the Ranjit Roy Chaudhary report. And now's the time for industry and other stakeholders to really bring out a proper representation on what is critical for our industry.
Right. So that's clinical trials. Now let's look at the growth and in the market itself, right? Which is growing, but at the same time, industry is not able to raise enough capital to do that. At least the multinational part.
The industry in the last few months has decelerated, and this has been a function of two things. One is the economic growth. There's a direct impact there, and there's been the impact of the pricing policy. I mean, there have been issues at the stockist level and etc., where orders did not take place on time. So that's had its own impact. But longer term, it's difficult to say whether this is a secular trend because given 1.2 billion, a lot of people joining at the bottom of the pyramid on treatment, a lot of people coming in on the chronic side, I think it'll still be broadly a market that will grow between 12 to 15% generally. However, if we have having said all that, if we have one bad year next year, the economic growth continues to be low, then that will have its own manifold implications. Regarding capital, yes, the IPO market is dead, nearly, though the stock markets are strong at the moment, but we have seen heightened PE interest come back in the last few days. The problem is not the capital, the problem is in the approvals, the FIPB, the DIPP, to bring in foreign capital either by way of an acquisition partner.
So we saw the Mylan case, right? So why is it taking so long? What's the...
Again, the concern is that the prices of products would have gone up and so on and so forth. I can't speak to that specifically. Generally, the concern of the policymakers is that the prices will go up. It'll have a deleterious impact on the affordability situation, which is well understood. But I think in some cases this is not correct. I mean, some companies are contract manufacturers, they clearly do not sell into the country. And there has to be a case of looking at it differently. If you bring everything into the basket of pharma, everything into the basket of prices will go up, then everybody gets impacted. And whether you're a medical device maker with a different set of problems, whether you're a PE firm or a strategic player, all are impacted, and hence there's a little bit of logjam there. Not to say deals won't happen, not to say capital can't come in, but the time delay that it takes for it to happen is certainly not the best place to be, given just now when we have an FDI issue in the country.
Right. So if I were to ask you to paint a picture of the health landscape, or a health check of the landscape rather, of the Indian landscape, what does it look like, and what are the immediate opportunity areas which needed to be addressed?
The opportunities are quite clear. India is moving towards becoming a manufacturing hub. We've seen investment come in. I mean, there have been some significant investments made by, such as Hospira, for example, into Indian manufacturing. These are very large, very big vote of confidence in the country at the right time. So those pockets will continue. It's very well understood about all the manufacturing, and it's now hitting critical mass. We spoke about it all these years, but the scale of manufacturing investment that we now see taking place on the ground, that's clearly a very bright spot. Indian companies have done very well, the top 10, 20 out of the US markets. Their aspirations to go to Japan. The quality of results this year, again, there's a lot of optimism there. When you talk to Indian companies, they are very clear about what they want to come out with: complex drugs, differentiated products, biosimilar, biogenerics. So I think there's a great deal of excitement in terms of the new treatments that will come out. What needs to be fixed is, maybe a little light touch on regulatory, but a more surer touch. This very multi-stakeholder, everybody has a veto in your life kind of an approach is pretty much got us to where we are. And in spite of that, the industry has still managed last year to get north of 12-13% growth rate.
Right.
And so that needs to be looked at. And the opportunities for India, just a little bit ahead of time, lie in the world of big data and analytics that are coming up.
Which will help us understand our own problems better.
Which will help us. Yeah, people are asking, even globally, people are asking very hard questions from pharmaceutical manufacturers about, does your drug really work? What are the outcomes? What are the data? Like we just discussed, there are advancements in technology everywhere, whether you call it Google Glass or genomics, and people are trying to make sense of all of that. India, as you rightly mentioned, great IT industry. I think the opportunities for collaboration between these two industries is very exciting, and how will we get there? Parallel to this is also the healthcare debate. Pharma is just one stakeholder in the healthcare debate, though he may be a critical, he or she may be a critical one. You've got the clinician, that is the delivery systems. The government delivery system is in shambles. Much more needs to be done. The financing system is not quite there. We are still an out-of-pocket market. If we don't move to an insured market, I mean, how can you afford more specialized cures and therapies, the higher costing ones? The procurement policy of the government, that has to be hiked up. China has done that successfully. It has put that at the center of its universal health coverage, and they've got a large market that they've created for pharmaceutical companies. So many of these things need to come together, and if they come together, then yes, I mean, given the kind of head start we've had in this business, we can capitalize a lot more.
Right. So
the shame is that people are just bumping along the bottom and blundering along with all the regulatory headwinds.
Right. So last questions. How's the year ahead looking to you? I mean, let's keep the regulation.
This year is looking.
aside,
I mean, I'm still too early to call. Like I said, 3 or 4 months ago, and we will take out the foreign element. By that I mean the export element will still come out strong. There have been some very good launches across the board by many different companies. We still see export performance striking, and more so on the back of the rupee depreciation. Clearly a net gainer in results. The local market will be a little soft on the back of the events of NLEM, stock is set next to. So it's going to be a blend, but overall, we still think the companies are going to post.
And some of these things you also feel are cyclical, like stock is pushing back.
These are all cyclical. I think with the return of the economic growth rate, which we'll see perhaps post the next elections when people have had more time to concentrate on the economy, it's a direct function of that. We can see the headwinds kind of abate a little bit and optimism return, and it's a direct function of that. That will lift up the market as well. So all of that will happen next year. This year, we may still broadly end up in a good place due to rupee depreciation being, as one example.
So last question, sir. You've covered and practiced pharmaceuticals as a manufacturer in the past. And how do you see this particular phase in contrast to all these years that you've been? I mean, for instance, should one feel despondent, cautious, optimistic?
Yeah, we should feel optimistic. I've never seen in my life Indian companies acquire so much muscle, so much steel, so much capabilities as I'm seeing now. I mean, it's really heartening. And all of them, all of the top 15, 20, 30 companies, we are blessed to have some of these great makers. The emphasis on quality, which is coming, the US FDA will only make it much better. So I think industry on its own is in a very solid footing.
Right.
I think it is, again, from a government point of view, this industry always looks to government for leadership. I think a little bit of, like I said, light touch, but surer touch. Keeping patients front and center of the conversation as opposed to turf wars. This would help going forward, and that's where the problems lie.
Right, Sujay. Look forward to your report next year. Thank you so much.